Sam Ortega never expected that helping a stranger would land him in handcuffs. The 53-year-old cab driver was rushing home to his teenage daughter when he spotted a well-dressed woman slumped against a broken-down limousine outside Murphy's Jazz Club. She was swaying dangerously close to the busy street, clearly intoxicated and disoriented. Sam did what any decent person would do. He steadied her, tried to keep her safe. Minutes later, police arrived and saw exactly what they expected to see: a working-class man and a wealthy woman in distress. Without asking questions, they cuffed Sam and threw him in the back of their patrol car. The woman, Elaine Beaumont, a reclusive hotel billionaire, passed out before she could explain what really happened. Sam spent the night in jail while his daughter waited alone in their dark apartment. But what happens the next morning will change both their lives forever. Will Sam's act of kindness destroy his family, or will it lead to something neither he nor Elaine ever saw coming? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in the precinct lobby buzzed with that familiar institutional hum that Sam Ortega had hoped never to hear again. His wrists still bore the red marks from the handcuffs, and his uniform shirt, the same one he'd worn for his 12-hour shift the night before, carried the stale scent of cigarettes and desperation from the holding cell. As he walked through the heavy glass doors into the gray morning light, Sam's first thought wasn't about the humiliation or the injustice of it all. It was about Sophia. His daughter would be getting ready for school right now, probably wondering where he was, why he hadn't come home. The thought of her waiting in their small apartment, checking her phone for a text that never came, made his chest tighten with a familiar ache, the same one he'd carried for 3 years now. Ever since Maria's funeral. Sam pulled his phone from his pocket with trembling fingers. 17 missed calls from Sophia. His heart lurched. "Papa?" Her voice was small and she answered on the first ring. "Papa, where are you? Mrs. Chun said you never came home, and I was so scared." "I'm okay. Mia, I'm coming home now." Sam's voice cracked. Despite his efforts to sound strong, there was just a misunderstanding. Everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine, and they both knew it. The cab ride home in another driver's taxi, since his own was still impounded as evidence, took 23 minutes through the morning traffic of East San Antonio. Sam watched the familiar neighborhoods roll past, the corner store where he bought Sophia's favorite cereal when they had extra money, the park where Maria used to take her to feed the ducks, the bus stop where his daughter waited each morning for her ride to Jefferson High School. This was his world. Not the gleaming downtown hotels or the jazz clubs where wealthy women stumbled out of limousines. This was where he belonged, where he understood the rules, where a man's word still meant something and neighbors looked out for each other's children. The apartment building at 1247 Flory Street had seen better decades. The beige stucco was cracked in places, and the wrought iron balconies had more rust than paint, but it was home. Sam climbed the exterior stairs to the second floor, his legs heavy with exhaustion and dread. How would he explain this to Sophia? How could he make her understand that sometimes the world just wasn't fair, no matter how hard you tried to do the right thing? The door opened before he could turn his key. "Papa." Sophia threw her arms around him, and for a moment Sam forgot about everything else. At 17, his daughter was nearly as tall as he was, with Maria's worn brown eyes and the same stubborn chin that had gotten him into trouble more times than he could count. She pulled back to study his face, her hands still gripping his shoulders. "You look terrible," she said with a matter-of-fact honesty that reminded him so much of her mother. "What happened, really?" Sam stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened into the living room, and a bathroom with a shower that only worked if you hit the handle just right. But Sophia had made it warm with her mother's quilts and the family photos that covered every available surface. The scent of coffee and cinnamon told him she'd made breakfast, probably worried sick about him the entire time. "I helped someone," Sam said, sinking into the worn recliner that had been his refuge for the past 3 years. "A woman. She was drunk, about to fall into traffic. I steadied her. Made sure she was safe." Sophia settled on the arm of his chair, the way she used to when she was little, and he'd read to her before bed. "And they arrested you for that?" "They saw what they expected to see, Mia. A man like me and a woman like her." Sam rubbed his eyes, feeling every one of his 53 years. Sometimes that's all it takes. The injustice of it burned in his throat like acid. He'd worked 2 jobs for most of Sophia's life, first as a mechanic and then driving cab when his back couldn't handle the heavy lifting anymore. He'd never missed a parent-teacher conference or a school play. He voted in every election, paid his taxes, helped his neighbors when they needed it. He'd raised his daughter to believe that goodness mattered, that treating people with dignity and respect would be rewarded in kind. Last night had shattered that illusion like a brick through glass. "Pape," Sophia said gently, "you did the right thing. You know that, right?" Sam looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who'd learned to be strong too early, who helped with grocery shopping and never complained when they had to eat beans and rice for a week straight, who maintained a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at the library to help with expenses. She was everything good about him and Maria combined, and she deserved better than a father who got arrested for trying to help someone. "I know," he said, though the words felt hollow, "but knowing doesn't pay the rent, does it?" Sophia's expression tightened. She was old enough to understand their financial situation, old enough to know that her father missing, even one day of work, could mean choosing between groceries and the electric bill. "How bad is it?" "I don't know yet." Sam forced himself to be honest with her. He'd learned that lesson from Maria, who'd always said that children could handle the truth better than they could handle being lied to. "The cab's impounded. Could be a few days before I get it back, maybe longer. I'll have to see about borrowing money to rent another one." Or a knock at the door interrupted him. Sam and Sophia exchanged glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and unexpected visitors in their neighborhood were rarely good news. Through the peephole, Sam saw Mrs. Chun from apartment 2C, holding a covered plate. He opened the door to find the elderly woman's concerned face creased with worry. "Sam, thank goodness you're home. Sophia was so frightened last night." Mrs. Chun pushed past him into the apartment with the familiarity of someone who'd become family over the years. She'd been Maria's friend first, had held Sophia when she cried at the funeral, had brought soup when Sam came down with pneumonia the winter after his wife died. "I'm sorry she bothered you," Sam said, accepting the plate of what smelled like her famous pork dumplings. "I should have called, but don't be ridiculous. That child is never a bother." Mrs. Chun settled into the kitchen chair with the authority of someone who'd earned the right to speak her mind. "Now, what's this about you being arrested?" Sam told the story again, watching Mrs. Chun's expression grow darker with each detail. She'd lived through enough decades to understand how the world worked, how men like Sam were often presumed guilty until proven innocent, how wealth and poverty existed in different universes with different rules. "This is not right," she said when he finished. "This is not justice." "No," Sam agreed, "but it's reality. So what will you do?" It was the question Sam had been dreading. His savings account had exactly $347 in it, not enough to rent a cab for more than a few days, certainly not enough to hire a lawyer if charges were filed. He had a clean record, but that didn't matter if the woman decided to press charges. If the media got hold of the story, if his reputation in the tight-knit cab driver community was destroyed. "I'll figure something out," he said, "because that's what fathers did. They figured things out, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. Sophia squeezed his shoulder. "We'll figure it out," she corrected, and Sam's heart swelled with pride and guilt in equal measure. She shouldn't have to worry about adult problems, shouldn't have to be his partner in survival at 17. But Maria had been gone for 3 years now, and they'd learned to be a team whether they wanted to or not. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Sophia answered it, her voice cautious. "Ortega residence. Yes, he's here. Who's calling, please?" Her eyes widened as she looked at Sam. "It's someone from the police station. They want to talk to you." Sam's stomach clenched as he took the phone, expecting the worst. More charges, perhaps. A court date. The beginning of the end of everything. He'd worked so hard to build. "Mr. Ortega? This is Sergeant Martinez from the downtown precinct. I need you to come in this morning. There's been a development in your case." "What kind of development?" "The complainant wants to speak with you. She's here now, and she's asking specifically for you. Can you be here within the hour?" Sam looked at Sophia and Mrs. Chun, both watching. Him with worried expressions. The complainant, the woman he'd tried to help. What could she possibly want with him now? "I'll be there," he said, and hung up. Sophia was already reaching for her jacket. "I'm coming with you." "No, Mia. You have school, and I don't want you anywhere near Papa." Her voice carried the same gentle firmness that Maria had used when she'd made up her mind about something. "I'm 17, not 7, and you're not going through this alone." Sam looked at his daughter, this fierce, loyal young woman who'd inherited the best of both her parents, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. In the past 18 hours, he'd been humiliated, degraded, and treated like a criminal. But he'd also been reminded of what mattered most. The people who loved him, who believed in him, who stood by him when the world seemed determined to tear him down. He built a good life on the foundation of that love. Whatever happened next, whatever the wealthy woman wanted to say to him, he wouldn't let it destroy what he and Sophia had built together. "All right," he said, pulling on his jacket. "But we stop by the school first, so you can tell them you'll be late." As they walked down the stairs together, Sam caught sight of his reflection in Mrs. Chun's window. He looked older than his 53. Years, worn down by responsibility and loss and the constant struggle to make ends meet. But he also looked like a man who'd raised a remarkable daughter, who'd loved a wonderful woman, who'd built something meaningful from the pieces of a working-class life. Whatever waited for him at the police station, he'd face it the same way. He'd faced everything else since Maria's death, with dignity, with love for his family, and with the quiet strength that came from knowing who he was and what he stood for. The wealthy woman could have her limousines and her jazz clubs and her world where money solved every problem. Sam had something better. He had Sophia and Mrs. Chun and the warm wedding ring on his finger that reminded him every day that he'd been loved by someone. Extraordinary Dot that was worth more than all the money in the world. Dot. And if the events of last night had taught him anything, it was that sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as disasters, and the people who seemed like strangers might just turn out to be exactly who you needed to meet. The downtown precinct looked different in daylight, less menacing, more like what it was. A tired government building where tired people processed the endless complications of urban life. Sam walked through the same doors he'd been dragged through 12 hours earlier, but this time Sophia was beside him, her hand briefly touching his elbow in support. Sergeant Martinez met them in the lobby, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and kindness. "Mr. Ortega, thank you for coming. Miss Bowmont is waiting in conference room 2. "Bowmont?" Sophia whispered as they followed the sergeant down a hallway lined with missing person posters and community service announcements. "The woman from last night," Sam murmured back, though the name meant nothing to him. He'd grown up in neighborhoods where people were known by their first names and the work they did, not by surnames that might appear in newspaper business sections. Conference room was small and windowless, furnished with a metal table and plastic chairs that had seen better decades. The woman sitting on the far side looked nothing like the disoriented stranger Sam had encountered outside the jazz club. This version of Elaine Beaumont was composed, alert, and unmistakably powerful. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Sam made in 2 months. Her posture was perfect, her makeup flawless, her jewelry understated but clearly expensive. Everything about her spoke of control, of a life lived with precision and purpose. But her eyes told a different story. They were the same eyes Sam had seen in his bathroom mirror for the past 3 years, the eyes of someone carrying a weight that money couldn't lift. Mr. Ortega. She stood as they entered, extending a manicured hand. I'm Elaine Beaumont. I owe you an apology, and a great deal more. Sam shook her hand, surprised by the firmness of her grip. This is my daughter, Sophia. Ms. Bowmont, Sophia said politely, though Sam could hear the protective edge in her voice. Elaine gestured for them to sit. Please call me Elaine. What I have to say is going to sound strange, but I need you to hear me out. She reached into an expensive leather briefcase and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table. The card was heavy stock, embossed, with gold lettering, Bowmont Hotels International. Elaine Beaumont, Chief Executive Officer. Sam stared at the card. He'd driven past the Bowmont Grand downtown countless times, had dropped off passengers at the elegant lobby with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers. He'd never imagined that the woman who owned that empire was the same person he'd found, slumped against a broken limousine. I remember everything that happened last night, Elaine said quietly. Every detail. How you approached me with such care, how you asked if I was all right, how you kept me from falling when I lost my balance. You probably saved my life, Mr. Ortega. Traffic on that street, at that time of night, I could have been killed. I just did what anyone would do, Sam said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. No, Elaine's voice was firm. Most people would have crossed the street, avoided getting involved. You stopped your taxi, got out in the rain, and helped a stranger. And for that kindness, you were arrested, humiliated, and spent the night in jail while your daughter worried herself sick. Sophia shifted in her chair. He's a good man, she said simply. He's always helping people. Elaine smiled the first, genuine expression Sam had seen from her. I can see that. And I can see where he learned it. She turned back to Sam. I've already spoken with the district attorney. All charges have been dropped. There will be no record of your arrest. No. Mark on your record. But that's not enough. Not nearly enough. It's enough, Sam said quickly. I just want my cab back and to get back to work. Your cab has been released and is waiting in the impound lot. The fees have been waived. Elaine leaned forward, her expression intense. But I have a proposition for you, and I hope you'll consider it carefully. Sam felt Sophia tense beside him. Propositions from wealthy people rarely worked out well for people like them. I need a driver, Elaine continued. Not just any driver. I need someone I can trust, someone with integrity, someone who won't judge me for my mistakes. I need that for 30 days. You must have drivers already, Sophia said skeptically. Someone like you, someone like me has employees, not allies, Elaine said with a sad smile. I have a staff that manages my schedule, protects my image, and reports to my board of directors. What I need is someone who will help me do something I should have done years ago. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. I'm an alcoholic, Mr. Ortega. Last night wasn't an aberration. It was Tuesday. I've been drinking myself to death. For the better part of 5 years, ever since my parents died and left me alone with an empire I never wanted to run. A confession hung in the air like smoke. Sam had known addicts, had lost friends to drugs and alcohol, had seen families destroyed by substances that promised relief but delivered only pain. But he'd never heard someone speak about their addiction with such clinical honesty. "I've tried to quit before," Elaine continued. "Rehab facilities, private therapists, interventions staged by well-meaning board members. But I've never tried recovery with someone who has nothing to gain from my success or failure. Someone who sees me as a human being, not as a business asset." "What exactly are you asking?" Sam said carefully. "I want to hire you as my sober companion and driver for 30 days. You'll drive me to AA meetings, to therapy appointments, to the places I need to go to rebuild my life. In exchange, I'll pay you $5,000 a week." Sophia gasped. $20,000 more than Sam made in 6 months of 12-hour shifts. Enough to pay off their credit cards, fix the car, maybe even start a college fund for Sophia. "That's too much," Sam said immediately. "I can't accept charity. It's not charity." Elaine's voice was crisp, businesslike. "It's a job, and frankly, you'd be earning every penny. Do you have any idea how difficult I can be when I'm fighting my own demons? You'd be working harder than you've ever worked in your life." Sam studied her face, looking for the catch, the hidden agenda, the strings that always came attached to offers that seemed too good to be true. But all he saw was a woman who was tired of being alone with. Her pain. "Why me?" He asked. "You could hire anyone, professionals who know about addiction, people with training, because you helped me when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose," Elaine said simply. "Because your daughter defends you like you're the most important person in her world. Because you'd rather sleep in your car than accept money you haven't earned. Because you're exactly the kind of person I need to remind me who I want to become." Sophia touched Sam's arm. "Papa," she whispered, $20,000 could change everything for us." Sam knew she was right. $20,000 would mean Sophia could focus on her studies instead of working at the library. It would mean they could move to a better apartment, maybe even in a different school district. It would mean security, opportunity, a chance at the kind of life Maria had always wanted for their daughter. But it would also mean accepting help, admitting that he couldn't provide for his family on his own. It would mean entering a world he didn't understand, with rules he didn't know, surrounded by people who spoke a different language of privilege and power. "I need time to think about it," Sam said. Elaine nodded. "Of course. But I should mention, there's another factor to consider." She reached into her briefcase again and withdrew a thick legal document. "The city's insurance company has contacted me about a potential lawsuit. Wrongful arrest, violation of civil rights, damage to reputation. They're concerned about liability." Sam's stomach clenched. "I don't want to sue anyone. I know. But they don't know that. And frankly, you'd have every right to pursue legal action. What happened to you was wrong, Mr. Ortega. Legally and morally wrong." Elaine's expression hardened. "I've spent my entire adult life watching men in expensive suits make problems disappear with money and lawyers. I won't be part of that system anymore." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you work with me for 30 days, I'll make sure you're compensated fairly for what you've been put through. But more than that, I'll make sure this never happens again. To you or to anyone else. I have influence in this city, and I intend to use it to demand better training for police officers, better protocols for handling situations involving vulnerable people." Sophia was staring at Elaine with something approaching awe. "You'd do that? Really?" "Your father helped me when I needed it most," Elaine said. "It's time I learned to help others the same way." Sam felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart since Maria's death. This woman was offering him more than money. She was offering him purpose, dignity, a chance to be part of something bigger than survival. 30 days, he said slowly. And then what? Then you go back to your life, and I go back to mine. No strings, no obligations. Just two people who helped each other when it mattered most. Sam looked at Sophia, who was nodding encouragingly. He thought about Mrs. Chun, who'd always told him that opportunities came disguised as challenges. He thought about Maria, who'd believed that people were fundamentally good, that kindness was never wasted, that taking care of each other was what made life worth living. All right, he said finally. 30 days, but I have conditions. Elaine smiled a real smile this time, warm and grateful. Name them. My daughter comes first, always. If she needs me, I go, no questions asked. Agreed. I drive my own cab, not some fancy car. I'm a cab driver, not a chauffeur. Fair enough. And if I think you're in danger from alcohol or anything else, I call 911. I won't enable your addiction, no matter how much you're paying me. Elaine extended her hand across the table. Mr. Ortega, I think this might be the beginning of a very interesting partnership. As Sam shook her hand, he felt the weight of the business card in his other palm. 24 hours ago, he'd been a struggling cab driver with nothing but his dignity and his love for his daughter. Now he was embarking on a journey with a billionaire who needed his help to find her way back to herself. He had no idea what the next 30 days would bring. But for the first time since Maria's death, Sam Ortega felt like he was moving toward something instead of just trying to survive each day as it came. Outside the conference room window, the morning sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the city he'd called home for his entire life. Somewhere out there, his cab was waiting to take him on the strangest journey of his life, and despite everything the arrest, the humiliation, the uncertainty, Sam found himself looking forward to the road ahead. The Bowmont estate sat behind iron gates on the city's north side, in a neighborhood where the houses had names instead of numbers and the lawns looked like golf courses. Sam had driven through these streets before, dropping off passengers at charity galas and corporate events, but he'd never imagined he'd be walking up the front steps of one of these mansions as anything other than hired help, which, he supposed, he still was. The front door opened before he could ring the bell, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of posture that suggested decades of managing other people's lives. She wore a simple black dress and sensible shoes, but her manner was anything but subservient. You must be Mr. Ortega, she said, extending a hand. I'm Catherine Mills, Miss Beaumont's personal assistant. She's told me about your arrangement. Sam shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the way her eyes assessed him quickly, but not unkindly. Nice to meet you. She's waiting in the study. Follow me, please. The interior of the house was everything Sam had expected and nothing like he'd imagined. Yes, there were marble floors and crystal chandeliers, artwork that probably cost more than his annual salary. But there was also a lived-in quality that surprised him. Books scattered on side tables, reading glasses left on chair arms, a coffee mug with a lipstick stain on the rim. This was someone's home, not just a showcase. Mr. Ortega is here, Catherine announced, opening the door to a room lined floor to ceiling with books. Elaine looked up from behind an enormous desk covered with papers and file folders. She was dressed more casually today, dark slacks and a cream-colored sweater, but she still carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. Sam, thank you for coming. She gestured to a leather chair across from her desk. I hope you don't mind, but I've taken the liberty of researching 8 meetings in the area. There's one this afternoon in St. Mark's Episcopal. It might work well for a first attempt. Sam settled into the chair, which was more comfortable than anything in his apartment. You've never been to a meeting before? I've been to meetings, Elaine said carefully, but I've never been to a meeting where I intended to actually participate. There's a difference between showing up because your lawyer insists and showing up because you want to get better. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small plastic chip, setting it on the desk between them. It was white with 90 days, printed in blue letters. "I've been carrying this around for 2 years," she said. "I bought it online, told myself I'd earned it. But we both know that's not how it works." Sam picked up the chip, surprised by how light it was. "You've never had 90 days sober?" "I've had 90 hours. Maybe once I managed 96. Elaine's voice was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. "I'm what they call a high-functioning alcoholic, which means I've gotten very good at managing my drinking around my responsibilities. Board meetings at 10, martinis at lunch, conference calls at 3, wine with dinner, scotch before bed, rinse and repeat. What made you decide to stop?" Elaine was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at gardens that were probably tended by a full-time staff. "I woke up 3 mornings ago on my bathroom floor, still wearing my clothes from the night before. I'd missed a board meeting, something I've never done in 20 years of running this company. My assistant had to lie to the board, tell them I had food poisoning." She turned back to him, and Sam saw something raw in her expression. "I realized I was one blackout away from losing everything my parents built. More than that, I was one blackout away from dying alone, and no one would find me for days." The honesty was uncomfortable in its starkness. Sam had seen addiction up close. His brother Miguel had struggled with cocaine for years before finally getting clean, but he'd never heard someone describe their rock bottom with such clinical precision. "The meeting starts at 5, Elaine continued. "I thought we could leave around 4:30, give ourselves time to find parking and get settled." "All right. What should I expect?" "I don't know," Elaine admitted. "I've only been to private sessions with therapists who charge $500 an hour and tell me what they think I want to hear. This will be different." At 4:15, Sam was waiting in the circular driveway beside his cab when Elaine emerged from the house. She'd changed into jeans and a simple blouse, as if trying to blend in, but everything about her still screamed money and privilege. It wasn't just the clothes or the jewelry. It was the way she moved, the set of her shoulders, the unconscious assumption that the world would accommodate her needs. "Ready?" Sam asked as she settled into the back seat. "No," Elaine said. "But let's go anyway." St. Mark's Episcopal Church was a modest brick building in a middle-class neighborhood, surrounded by minivans and aging sedans. Sam's yellow cab looked perfectly at home in the parking lot, which seemed to ease some of Elaine's tension. "It looks so normal," she said as they walked toward the entrance. "What were you expecting?" "I don't know. Something more institutional, I suppose. More clinical." The meeting was held in the church's fellowship hall, a room with folding chairs arranged in a circle and a coffee pot that had seen better decades. About 15 people were already seated, ranging in age from perhaps 25 to 70, dressed in everything from work uniforms to business casual. Sam took a seat near the back, but Elaine hesitated in the doorway. For a moment he thought she might bolt, might retreat to the safety of her mansion and her carefully controlled world. But then a woman with graying hair and kind eyes approached. "Them? First time?" she asked gently. "Yes," Elaine said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Margaret. I've been coming here for about 6 years now. Would you like to sit with me?" Elaine glanced back at Sam, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm Elaine, and yes, that would be nice." Sam watched as Margaret led Elaine to chairs in the middle of the circle, chatting quietly about the format of the meeting and the people they'd be sitting with. It was the first time he'd seen anyone treat Elaine as just another person seeking help, and the effect was immediate. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing seemed to ease. The meeting followed a familiar pattern that Sam recognized from the few Al-Anon sessions he'd attended during Miguel's worst years. Stories shared, wisdom offered, struggles acknowledged without judgment. But what struck him most was how Elaine truly listened, to each person who spoke. When it came her turn to share, she simply said, "I'm Elaine, and I'm an alcoholic. This is my first meeting, and I'm here because I'm tired of being afraid of my own life." The group welcomed her with murmured affirmations, and Sam saw something in her expression that he hadn't seen before. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of hope. After the meeting, they stood outside the church as other members chatted in small groups before heading to their cars. Elaine seemed reluctant to leave, as if she wanted to absorb every detail of the experience. "How do you feel?" Sam asked as they walked to the cab. "Terrified," Elaine said honestly, "but also lighter somehow. Does that make sense?" It makes perfect sense. During the drive back to her house, Elaine was unusually quiet. Sam let the silence stretch, understanding that she was processing something important. Finally, as they turned into her neighborhood, she spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about doing what anyone would do. But the truth is, most people in my position wouldn't have stopped to help a stranger. We're trained from childhood to avoid messy situations, to let other people handle problems." "But you would have," Sam said. "If you'd been sober, if you'd seen someone in trouble, you would have helped." "How can you be so sure?" Sam pulled into her driveway and turned to look at her. "Because you're here. Because instead of pretending last night never happened, you're trying to make it right. Because you're paying a stranger more money than he's ever seen to help you get better. That's not the behavior of someone who doesn't care about other people." Elaine was quiet for a moment, then smiled, a small, tentative expression that transformed her face. "Thank you, Sam, for today, for believing in me when I'm not sure I believe in myself." As she walked toward her front door, Sam noticed something different in her step. Not confidence exactly, but purpose. The woman who'd stumbled outside the jazz club 3 nights ago had been lost, drowning in her own despair. The woman walking up these steps was still struggling, still afraid, but she was moving forward instead of just surviving. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "How was the first day?" "Are you okay?" Sam smiled as he typed back. "Fine, Mia. See you at dinner." But as he drove home through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, Sam found himself thinking about the expression on Elaine's face during the meeting, the hunger in her eyes as she listened to other people's stories of recovery and relapse, hope and despair. She was searching for something, just as he'd been searching for 3 years now. Ever since Maria's death had left him feeling unmoored in his own life. Maybe that was why this arrangement felt right, despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. They were both trying to find their way back to themselves, to remember who they'd been before life had taught them to expect disappointment and loss. Tomorrow would bring another meeting, another small step toward whatever healing looked like. For a billionaire who'd forgotten how to trust, and a cab driver who'd forgotten how to hope for anything beyond making it through another day. But today had been a beginning, and sometimes that was enough. The second week of their arrangement began with an unexpected request. Instead of heading to an AA meeting or therapy appointment, Elaine asked Sam to drive her to the grocery store. "The grocery store?" Sam repeated, sure he'd misheard. "Don't you have people who do your shopping?" "I have people who do everything," Elaine said as they pulled out of her driveway. "I haven't been inside a grocery store in probably 5 years. But yesterday at the meeting, Margaret was talking about the importance of normal activities in recovery. She said shopping for your own food, cooking your own meals, it grounds you in reality." Sam navigated toward the AEB on Broadway, trying to imagine this elegant woman pushing a shopping cart down fluorescent-lit aisles. "You know how to cook?" "I used to. My mother taught me when I was young, before." Elaine paused, then continued more quietly. "Before I learned that wealthy people don't cook for themselves." The grocery store was busy with the usual Thursday afternoon crowd, mothers with toddlers in tow. Elderly couples consulting carefully written lists. Teenagers buying energy drinks and chips. Elaine stood at the entrance for a moment, overwhelmed by the sensory assault of bright lights, competing conversations, and the general chaos of ordinary life. "It's louder than I remembered," she said. Sam grabbed a cart and handed it to her. "You get used to it." Sophia and I usually shop on Sunday mornings when it's quieter, but she had a school project, so we came yesterday instead. As they walked through the produce section, Sam watched Elaine examine vegetables with the concentration of someone trying to decode a foreign language. She picked up a tomato, turned it over in her hands, then looked at him helplessly. "How do you know if it's ripe?" "Here," Sam said, showing her how to check for firmness, for the right color, for the sweet smell that indicated freshness. "Maria taught me that. She said a good tomato was the foundation of any decent meal." "Tell me about her," Elaine said as they moved to the herbs. "Your wife." Sam found himself talking as they shopped, sharing memories that he usually kept carefully locked away. Maria's laugh, which had been too loud for fancy restaurants, but perfect for their kitchen table. Her terrible attempts at singing while she cooked. The way she'd dance while stirring sauce. Pulling Sophia into impromptu salsa lessons between the stove and the refrigerator. "She sounds wonderful," Elaine said softly. She was. She made everything better just by being there. Our apartment, our neighborhood, our whole world. After she died, I didn't know how to live in that world without her. They'd stopped in the cereal aisle, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Elaine spoke. "I think that's what alcohol was for me. A way to live in a world that felt impossible to navigate sober. When my parents died, I inherited this empire that I never wanted. Surrounded by people who saw me as a business asset rather than a person. Drinking was the only way I could tolerate the loneliness." "But you're not drinking now," Sam pointed out. "No, but I'm not exactly living either. I'm existing, following a routine, going through the motions. There's a difference." They finished shopping in companionable silence. Elaine carefully reading labels and comparing prices with the focus of someone learning a new skill. At the checkout line, she watched the process with fascination, the bagger's efficient movements, the cashier's practiced small talk, the ordinary choreography of daily life. $67.32, the cashier announced. Elaine reached for her wallet, but Sam gently touched her arm. "Watch first," he suggested. She observed as Sam counted out exact change, noting how he organized his bills, how he waited for the receipt, how he thanked the cashier by name. It was a master class in normalcy, and Sam realized that for all her wealth and sophistication, Elaine was essentially learning how to be a regular person. In the parking lot, as they loaded groceries into the cab, Elaine said, "I want to cook. Dinner tonight. For you and Sophia, if you'd be willing to come." Sam hesitated. Sharing meals felt too intimate, too much like friendship rather than the professional arrangement they'd agreed to maintain. But the hope in her voice reminded him of Sophia when she'd learned to make pancakes, proud and eager to share her newfound skill. "Are you sure? Sophia can be pretty direct about food she doesn't like." "I'm sure. Besides, if it's terrible, you can always order pizza." That evening, Sam and Sophia arrived at the Bowmont estate to find Elaine in the kitchen, a massive space with commercial-grade appliances and enough counter space for a restaurant. She'd changed into an apron that looked brand new and was standing over a recipe book with the intensity of someone diffusing a bomb. "Smells good in here," Sophia said politely, though Sam could tell she was nervous about this breach of their usual routine. "I'm making my mother's chicken piccata," Elaine said, looking up with flour on her cheek. "Or attempting to. I haven't made it in 20 years, so this could be an adventure." Sophia moved closer to the stove, her natural curiosity overcoming her shyness. "What's that you're doing to the chicken?" "Pounding it flat so it cooks evenly. Would you like to try?" For the next hour, Sam watched his daughter and his employer work side by side, Elaine patiently teaching Sophia techniques that had been passed down through generations of Bowmont women. The kitchen filled with the sounds of sizzling butter, clinking glasses, and Sophia's laughter as she tried to flip a piece of chicken and nearly launched it across the room. "Your daughter is remarkable," Elaine said quietly, as Sophia concentrated on stirring the sauce. "She has your kindness, but also something else, a strength that goes beyond her years." "She had to grow up fast after Maria died," Sam said. "Maybe. Too fast. No, I don't think so. I think she grew up exactly as much as she needed to, and no more. That's a gift, Sam knowing how to adapt without losing herself in the process." When they finally sat down to eat, the piccata was slightly overcooked and the sauce a bit too thick, but it tasted like care and effort and the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with people who mattered. Sophia told Elaine about her classes, her part-time job at the library, her plans for college if they could figure out how to afford it. "What do you want to study?" Elaine asked. "Social work," Sophia said without hesitation. "I want to help families like ours, people who work hard but still struggle, who need advocates to navigate systems that weren't designed for them." Elaine glanced at Sam, understanding passing between them. "That's a wonderful goal. The world needs more people who understand what it's like to fight for every opportunity." After dinner, Sophia insisted on helping with the dishes despite Elaine's protests. As they worked together at the enormous sink, Sam found himself studying the scene, his teenage daughter teaching a billionaire the most efficient way to scrape plates, both of them laughing at some shared joke. "Papa," Sophia said as they drove home, "she's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone colder, I guess. More removed from real life. But she listened to everything I said, like it actually mattered to her. And she's really trying, isn't she? With the meetings and cooking and everything?" "Yes, she's trying." "Good, because I think she needs us. Maybe not our money or anything like that, but our—" Sophia paused, searching for the right word. "Our humanity, I guess." "She's forgotten how to be around regular people." Sam marveled at his daughter's insight. At 17, Sophia could see things that had taken him days to understand. Elaine wasn't just hiring him to drive her to meetings. She was paying him to remember how to live in the world as something other than a business empire or a public persona. When his phone rang the next morning, Sam expected it to be Elaine confirming their meeting schedule. Instead, it was Catherine Mills, her assistant. "Mr. Ortega, I'm calling to thank you," Catherine said. "I've worked for Ms. Bowmont for 8 years, and yesterday was the first time I've seen her truly relaxed. Whatever you and your daughter did, the cooking, the conversation, the normalcy of it, she's different today. Calmer, more present." "We just had dinner," Sam said, uncomfortable with the praise. "No, it was more than that. You treated her like family, and she needs that more than she knows how to ask for it." After he hung up, Sam thought about Catherine's words. In the space of 10 days, his relationship with Elaine had evolved from professional obligation to something more complex. She wasn't just his employer anymore. She was becoming a friend, someone whose struggles he understood because they echoed his own. But friendship with someone like Elaine carried risks that went beyond the obvious differences in their social and economic status. When the 30 days ended, she would return to her world of board meetings and charity galas, while he went back to driving cab and worrying about rent. Getting too attached, letting Sophia get too attached, would only lead to disappointment when reality reasserted itself. Still, as he prepared for another day of IA meetings and quiet conversations, Sam found himself looking forward to seeing Elaine's face light up when she mastered some small piece of ordinary life. Whatever complications lay ahead, helping her rediscover her humanity was turning out to be good for his own soul too. And sometimes that was reason enough to take the risk. The call came at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, jarring Sam from the deepest sleep he'd had in weeks. His phone buzzed against the nightstand with an urgency that immediately set his heart racing. Calls at this hour were never good news. "Papa?" Sophia's voice was small and strained. "Papa, I need you." Sam was out of bed before she finished the sentence, pulling on jeans and a t-shirt while cradling the phone against his shoulder. "What's wrong, Mia? Where are you?" "I'm at the hospital. St. Joseph's. I was studying late, and suddenly I couldn't breathe, and my chest hurt so much. Mrs. Chun called 911. The drive to the hospital took 12 minutes that felt like hours." Sam's hands shook on the steering wheel as he navigated empty streets, his mind cycling through every worst-case scenario. Sophia was 17, healthy, strong, but so had Maria been, until the day she collapsed at work and never came home. The emergency room at St. Joseph's was brightly lit and mostly empty at this hour. Sam found Sophia in bed 3, hooked up to monitors and looking smaller than she had since childhood. Her face was pale but alert, and she managed a weak smile when she saw him. "Hey, Papa, sorry I scared you." "Don't apologize for scaring me," Sam said, taking her hand. "Just tell me what happened." A young doctor with tired eyes and scrubs pulled back the curtain. "Mr. Ortega? I'm Dr. Martinez. Your daughter had what appears to be a severe anxiety attack, complicated by some dehydration and exhaustion. Her vitals are stable now, but we want to keep her for observation for a few more hours." "Anxiety attack?" Sam looked at Sophia in confusion. "You've never had anxiety problems?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I've been having them for weeks, Papa. Ever since you got arrested. I keep thinking about what would happen to me if something happened to you, if you went to jail, if I ended up alone. I know it's stupid, but I can't stop worrying about everything." Sam felt his heart break and mend simultaneously. His strong, capable daughter had been carrying this fear in silence, trying to protect him from her own vulnerability, just as he'd been trying to protect her from their financial struggles. "Mia, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you have enough to worry about. You're working this new job, dealing with Elaine's problems, trying to take care of me. I didn't want to add to your stress." Dr. Martinez cleared his throat gently. "Anxiety in teenagers often manifests during times of family stress or major life changes. It's more common than you might think, and very treatable. But Sophia needs rest, better nutrition, and probably some counseling to develop coping strategies." "Whatever she needs," Sam said immediately, though his mind was already calculating the cost of therapy sessions they couldn't afford. "Papa," Sophia whispered, "I'm scared. What if this happens again? What if I can't handle college or life or—" "Hey!" Sam squeezed her hand. "Remember what your mother used to say? We're Ortegas. We bend, but we don't break. You're going to be fine, and we're going to figure this out together." As if summoned by their conversation, Sam's phone buzzed with a text message. At 2:30 in the morning, there was only one person who might be contacting him. "Is everything all right? I couldn't sleep and noticed your location has been at the hospital for an hour." Sam stared at the message, surprised by the concern and the fact that Elaine was apparently awake at this hour. He typed back quickly, "Sophia in A. Anxiety attack. We'll be here a while." The response came immediately. "On my way." "Who was that?" Sophia asked. "Elaine. She's coming." Sophia's expression shifted from surprise to something approaching panic. "Papa, no. I look terrible, and I don't want her to see me like this. She's going to think our family is falling apart." "Our family is not falling apart," Sam said firmly. "And Elaine has seen enough of her own dark moments to understand that we all struggle sometimes." 20 minutes later, Elaine appeared in the emergency room wearing jeans, sneakers, and a Northwestern University sweatshirt that made her look like any worried parent rather than a hotel magnate. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried 2 coffee cups and a small bag from the hospital gift shop. "How is she?" Elaine asked quietly, settling into the plastic chair beside Sam. "Physically fine. Emotionally," Sam shrugged helplessly. "I should have seen the signs. Should have known she was struggling." "You can't protect her from everything, Sam. Trust me. I've tried that approach with people I care about, and it doesn't work." Elaine pulled a small stuffed animal from the gift shop bag, a teddy bear wearing scrubs and a stethoscope. "For Sophia. I know she's 17, but sometimes we all need something to hold on to." When Dr. Martinez returned with discharge papers, he took Sam aside for a private conversation about Sophia's treatment options. The recommended therapy would cost $200 per session, and insurance would cover only a fraction of the cost. "I'll figure something out," Sam told the doctor. Though he had no idea how Dot, as they prepared to leave, Elaine approached Sophia's bedside. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Embarrassed," Sophia said honestly, "and scared. What if this happens?" "Again?" Elaine sat on the edge of the bed, her expression gentle but serious. "Can I tell you something about anxiety? It's your brain trying to protect you from dangers that might not even be real. For years, my anxiety told me that everyone I cared about would eventually leave me, so I stopped letting myself care about anyone. But you know what I learned? Avoiding the fear just makes it stronger. How do you make it go away? You don't make it go away. You learn to carry it differently. You build a life so strong and full of love that the anxiety becomes just one voice among many, instead of the only voice you hear." Sophia clutched the teddy bear to her chest. "Thank you for coming. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Elaine said simply. This is what people do for each other. In the hospital parking lot, as they prepared to follow Sam and Sophia home, Elaine touched his arm. "The therapy sessions Sophia needs. Let me handle the cost." "Elaine, no. I can't accept. This isn't charity, Sam. This is family taking care of family, and whether you're ready to admit it or not, that's what we've become." Sam wanted to argue, to maintain the boundaries that had kept him safe for 3 years. But looking at Sophia's pale face in the rearview mirror, seeing the exhaustion and fear in her eyes, he realized that his pride was a luxury his daughter couldn't afford. "All right," he said quietly, "but I pay you back when I can. We'll figure something out," Elaine said, echoing his earlier words to the doctor. The drive home was quiet, Sophia dozing in the back seat, while Sam processed the night's revelations. His daughter was struggling with anxiety that stemmed, at least in part, from their precarious financial situation and his arrest 2 weeks ago. Elaine had dropped everything to rush to the hospital, had stayed through the uncertainty and paperwork, had offered help without hesitation or judgment. At some point during the longest night he'd experienced since Maria's death, the careful, professional distance he'd maintained between himself and Elaine had collapsed entirely. She was no longer his employer. She was someone who cared about his family, someone he trusted with his daughter's well-being, someone who understood that love sometimes meant showing up at 2:30 in the morning with coffee and a stuffed animal. As he helped Sophia into bed and watched her fall asleep clutching the teddy bear, Sam realized that the walls he'd built around his heart were crumbling piece by piece. For 3 years, he'd convinced himself that he and Sophia were better off alone, that independence was safer than vulnerability, that asking for help was a sign of weakness rather than wisdom. But tonight had taught him something different. Sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was let someone else share your burden. Sometimes family was found rather than born. And sometimes the people who needed saving ended up doing the rescuing instead. Outside Sophia's bedroom window, the first light of dawn was breaking over the city. In a few hours, he'd drive Elaine to another A meeting, and they'd continue the careful work of rebuilding their lives one day at a time. But something fundamental had shifted in the space between crisis and comfort, between fear and love. We're no longer just employer and employee, or even friends helping each other through difficult times. They were becoming something deeper, more permanent, more necessary to each other's survival. And for the first time since Maria's death, that possibility didn't terrify him. It felt like hope. The final week of their 30-day arrangement arrived with the subtle melancholy of a vacation's end. Neither Sam nor Elaine spoke directly about the approaching deadline, but it hung between them like a held breath, coloring every conversation, and shared moment with the awareness that their time together was running out. Elaine's progress in recovery had been remarkable. She now chaired the Thursday evening AA meeting at St. Mark's, sharing her story with a kind of honesty that helped newcomers believe that change was possible. Her hands no longer shook during morning coffee, and she'd gained weight that softened the sharp angles of stress in her face. Most importantly, she'd begun to laugh again, not the polite laughter of business meetings, but the genuine, unguarded sound of someone who'd remembered how to find joy in ordinary moments. But with recovery came a different kind of loneliness. As the fog of alcohol lifted, Elaine was confronting the stark reality of her isolation. She had business associates, employees, board members, and social acquaintances, but no real friends. No one who called just to check in. No one who cared about her well-being beyond its impact on quarterly earnings. "I've been thinking about after," she said one afternoon as they drove home from a therapy session. "After our arrangement ends." Sam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What about it?" "I don't want to go back to the way things were. The empty house, the pointless social events, the meetings where everyone pretends to care about my opinions, while calculating how my decisions will affect their bottom line. So don't go back," Sam said, though his heart was racing at the implications of her words. "It's not that simple. I have responsibilities, obligations. You have choices," Sam interrupted. "Maybe not easy ones, but choices nonetheless." They drove in silence for several minutes before Elaine spoke again. "I keep thinking about that photo in my study, the one of my parents at the groundbreaking for their first hotel. They looked so happy, so proud of what they were building together. When did I stop caring about building something meaningful and start just trying to survive each day?" "When you stopped having people in your life who mattered more than business," Sam said gently. "When you forgot that success without connection is just expensive loneliness." Elaine turned to look at him. "Is that an invitation?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and risk in equal measure. Sam thought about Sophia, who'd grown attached to Elaine over the past month, who lit up when Elaine helped with homework or shared stories about her own college experiences. He thought about the way Elaine's face changed when she was in their apartment, how the mask of corporate competence fell away, replaced by something softer and more real. He thought about Maria and the conversation they'd had just weeks before, her death, about the importance of opening your heart, even when it meant risking pain. "Life's too short to play it safe all the time," Maria had said, watching Sophia practice violin with the fierce concentration of someone determined to master something beautiful. "Love is always a risk, Sam, but it's the only risk worth taking." "I don't know what I'm offering," Sam said honestly. "I drive a cab. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons. My world is nothing like yours. Your world has Sophia's laughter and Mrs. Chun's dumplings and neighbors who know each other's names," Elaine said. "Your world has people who show up when someone needs help. Your world has meaning beyond profit margins and stock prices. And your world has security, opportunity, the ability to make a real difference in people's lives, not without guidance, not without people who can remind me why the work matters." Elaine paused, then added quietly, "Not without you." That evening, they attended Sophia's school concert, something Elaine had asked to do since learning about it the week before. Sam watched his daughter perform a violin solo with the same pride he'd felt at every school event for the past 17 years, but tonight was different. Tonight, Elaine sat beside him in the auditorium, applauding enthusiastically and wiping away tears during Sophia's most emotional piece. "She's extraordinary," Elaine whispered during intermission. "You should be so proud." "I am, every day. She reminds me of myself at that age, before I learned to be afraid of wanting things too much, before I decided that caring about people was a liability." After the concert, they went for ice cream at a family-owned shop that had been Sam's tradition with Sophia since she was small. Elaine fit seamlessly into their routine, listening to Sophia's plans for college and offering advice about choosing majors and navigating financial aid applications. "I've been thinking about social work programs," Sophia said, stirring her chocolate chip mint with the focus of someone making important decisions. "There are some good ones in state, but the application deadlines are coming up fast." "Have you considered Northwestern?" Elaine asked casually. "They have an excellent social work program, and I know some people there who could help with the application process." Sophia's eyes widened. "Northwestern is expensive. Like really expensive. So is staying in state, if you factor in opportunity costs," Elaine said. "Sometimes investing more upfront pays off in the long run." Sam felt a familiar tension in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Elaine first offered to pay for Sophia's therapy. He appreciated her generosity, but he worried about Sophia getting used to having doors opened by wealth and influence rather than her own merit. "Sophia's earned everything she's gotten," he said carefully. "She'll earn her way into whatever school is right for her." "Of course she will," Elaine agreed. "But that doesn't mean she shouldn't have access to the same opportunities as students whose parents can write tuition checks without thinking twice." The conversation continued good-naturedly, but Sam sensed the underlying tension. Elaine's world offered possibilities that his never could, and he struggled with the ethics of exposing Sophia to opportunities they couldn't sustain without Elaine's continued involvement in their lives. Later that night, after dropping Elaine at her house, Sam and Sophia sat at their kitchen table with college brochures spread between them. "She's really something, isn't she?" Sophia said, running her finger along Northwestern's admission requirements. "She is." "Papa, can I ask you something? Do you like her? I mean, really like her?" Sam studied his daughter's face, seeing Maria's directness and intuition in her expression. "Why do you ask?" "Because you're different when you're with her. Happier, I think. Less worried about everything. And she's different too, more like a regular person instead of someone putting on a performance." "It's complicated, Mia. Love usually is," Sophia said with the wisdom of someone who'd observed human nature carefully for 17 years. "But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. Who said anything about love?" Sophia smiled, the same knowing smile Maria used to give him when he was being deliberately obtuse. "Papa, I'm not blind. The way you two look at each other, the way she dropped everything to come to the hospital, the way you both get quiet whenever someone mentions the 30 days ending, that's not friendship. That's people falling in love who are too scared to admit it." Sam felt his face warm. "It's not that simple. We come from different worlds, have different expectations. So did you and Mama," Sophia pointed out. She was college-educated, spoke 3 languages, came from a family of teachers. You were a high school dropout who worked with your hands. But you built something beautiful together. That was different. "How?" Sam struggled to articulate the differences that seemed so obvious to him. "Your mother and I were young. We grew up together, learned about the world together. Elaine and I are middle-aged adults with established lives, set patterns, with enough life experience to know what matters and what doesn't," Sophia interrupted. "Papa, I've watched you for 3 years since Mama died. You've been a good father, a good neighbor, a good man. But you haven't been happy. Not really. These past few weeks, watching you with Elaine, this is the first time I've seen you look forward to tomorrow instead of just trying to get through today. That night, Sam lay awake staring at the ceiling, Sophia's words echoing in his mind. Was he in love with Elaine Beaumont? The question felt simultaneously obvious and impossible. He cared about her well-being, looked forward to their daily conversations, felt protective of her vulnerability and proud of her progress. He admired her intelligence, her strength, her capacity for growth and change. But love? Love implied a future together, shared dreams, merged lives. Love meant Sophia would grow up in Elaine's world of privilege and opportunity, but also pressure and public scrutiny. Love meant he would have to learn to navigate social situations where his background and education would always mark him as an outsider. Love meant taking the biggest risk of his life just when he'd finally achieved some measure of stability and peace. But as Sam drifted toward sleep, his last coherent thought was of Elaine's laughter during Sophia's concert, the way her face had glowed with genuine pride and affection. Whatever the risks, whatever the complications, he was already in deeper than he'd ever intended to be. The only question now was whether he had the courage to admit it, to himself and to her, before their time together ran out. The reunion at Elaine's house 2 hours later was awkward and charged, with emotion that neither of them quite knew how to navigate. Sam found her in the study, still surrounded by legal documents, but looking smaller somehow, as if the weight of her doubts had physically diminished her. "Thank you for coming," she said, rising from behind the desk. "I wasn't sure you would." "Sophia convinced me that people deserve second chances," Sam said, remaining standing near the door. "Even people who should know better." Elaine flinched at the gentle rebuke, but didn't argue with it. "I've been thinking about that night, really thinking, not just remembering. And there are things that didn't make sense at the time, but do now." She moved to a whiteboard that hadn't been there that morning, covered with notes and timeline markers in her precise handwriting. "My limousine didn't just break down randomly. The mechanic who looked at it said the brake lines had been deliberately cut, not enough to cause an accident, just enough to strand me." Sam studied the timeline, noting the careful attention to detail that spoke of someone marshaling evidence for battle. "Someone wanted you stuck there. Someone wanted me vulnerable and visible, in a location where photographers could document my condition." Elaine pointed to a map she'd pinned beside the timeline. "Marcus owns the building across from Murphy's Jazz Club. His company uses it for client entertainment. He would have known I was there that night, because his assistant called my assistant to confirm my reservation. So he sabotaged your car and waited for you to stumble out drunk so he could photograph it? Not just photograph it. I think he was hoping for something worse, a car accident, maybe, or public intoxication charges that would give his company grounds to question my fitness to run Bowmont hotels." Sam felt a chill as the implications became clear. "But I interrupted. His plan by helping you." "Exactly." So he improvised, used the photos he had to create a different narrative. One where you and I were co-conspirators instead of strangers, where your kindness became evidence of a scheme. Elaine turned away from the whiteboard, and Sam saw tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sam. When I saw those legal papers this morning, when I read the implications about your character, I panicked. I've spent so many years learning not to trust anyone, learning to see ulterior motives everywhere. I forgot that some people really are just good." "Fear makes us stupid sometimes," Sam said, echoing her voicemail message. "But it doesn't have to make us cruel. I was cruel to you this morning. After everything you've done for me, everything you've given me, I questioned your integrity because some lawyer suggested I should. That's not fear, Sam. That's cowardice." Sam moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in her face, the way her hands shook slightly as she spoke. "What matters now is what we do next. How do we prove Marcus orchestrated this? We need evidence of the sabotage, witness testimony about what really happened that night, and proof that Marcus had both motive and opportunity. Elaine pulled out a legal pad covered with more notes. I have already hired a private investigator to examine the limousine more thoroughly, and I've contacted everyone who was at the jazz club that night to see if anyone noticed Marcus's photographers. What about the mechanic who worked on your car? Could he have been paid to cause the breakdown? That's where it gets interesting. Elaine's expression hardened with something that looked like satisfaction. The brake line damage was done with. A specific type of tool, something used in high-end automotive shops, but not by most independent mechanics. There are only 3 shops in the city that would have that equipment, and one of them is owned by Marcus's brother-in-law. Sam studied the evidence Elaine had assembled, impressed despite himself by her thoroughness. In less than 24 hours, she'd gone from victim to investigator, using resources and connections that someone like him could never access. This is good, he said, but will it be enough to prove conspiracy in court? Court isn't where this battle will be won. Elaine said grimly, Marcus is counting on public opinion, on the story being too complicated for people to follow. He wants the board of directors to see me as a liability, someone whose personal problems are damaging the company's reputation. So how do we fight that? By telling the truth first, loudly and publicly, before his version becomes the accepted narrative. Elaine moved to her computer and opened a file labeled Press Conference. I'm calling a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. I'll present our evidence, explain what really happened, and make it clear that this is corporate espionage disguised as a personal attack. Sam felt a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. A press conference means reporters, cameras, questions about my background and motivations. Are you sure you want me involved in that? I'm sure I can't do this without you, Elaine said firmly. Your presence, your willingness to stand with me despite how I hurt you this morning, that's the most powerful evidence we have that this relationship is real, not manufactured. Elaine, I need you to understand something. Sam moved to the window, looking out at the meticulously maintained gardens that would soon be overrun with reporters and camera crews. My life isn't designed for public scrutiny. Sophia and I live quietly, simply. We don't have lawyers or publicists or people whose job it is to manage our reputation. I know. And I'm asking you to risk all of that for me, for us, after I spent this morning treating you like a potential criminal. Elaine joined him at the window, standing close enough that he could smell her perfume. I don't have the right to ask, but I'm asking anyway. Sam thought about Sophia, who would have to face classmates and teachers after her father's face appeared on the evening news. He thought about Mrs. Chun and the other neighbors who might be questioned by reporters looking for dirt on his character. He thought about the cab drivers who'd become his community, who might wonder if he'd really been involved in some kind of scheme. But he also thought about the woman standing beside him, who'd spent 30 days learning to trust and be trusted, who'd opened her heart to him and Sophia, despite every instinct that told her to stay protected. She was asking him to risk everything he'd built in his quiet life, but she was also offering to risk everything she'd built in her public one. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. A joint press conference where we tell the true story together. You explain what you saw that night, why you helped, what our relationship has been like over the past month. I present the evidence of Marcus's sabotage and make it clear that this lawsuit is retaliation for his failed acquisition attempts. And if it backfires? If the media decides we're both lying, if Marcus's version is more compelling than ours? Elaine turned to face him fully, her expression serious but determined. Then we'll have lost everything while fighting for the truth, instead of losing everything while hiding from lies. Either way, Sam, I'm not letting Marcus destroy what we've built without a fight. Sam studied her face, seeing the woman who chaired a meetings with quiet strength, who'd learned to cook dinner for people she loved, who'd rushed to the hospital at 2:30 in the morning because Sophia needed help. This wasn't the terrified, isolated alcoholic he'd met 30 days ago. This was someone who'd remembered how to fight for things that mattered. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this my way too, not just yours." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't just present evidence and legal arguments. We tell a human story about two people who found each other when they both needed help. We make it about more than corporate warfare. We make it about what happens when decent people refuse to let powerful bullies win." Elaine smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "I think I can work with that approach." They spent the next 3 hours planning strategy, reviewing evidence, and preparing for questions that would inevitably focus on their personal relationship as much as the business conspiracy. Catherine brought dinner and coffee, treating Sam with the easy familiarity of someone who'd become part of the household rather than a temporary employee. "You should know," Catherine said as she cleared their plates. "The staff is behind you both completely. We've all seen how much happier Miss Bowmont has been these past weeks, and we've all seen how you treat her, with respect and kindness, not like a paycheck or a networking opportunity." "Thank you," Sam said, surprised by how much the support meant to him. "Don't thank me yet," Catherine replied with a grin. "Wait until you see the media circus tomorrow. Then we'll talk about whether you still appreciate our loyalty." As the evening wore on, Sam found himself studying Elaine with new eyes. The woman who'd doubted him that morning was gone, replaced by someone who'd chosen to believe in their connection, despite every rational reason to protect herself. She'd marshaled resources, gathered evidence, and prepared for battle, not just to save her company, but to save their relationship. "Can I ask you something?" Sam said during a break in their planning. "Anything. What changed your mind? This morning you were ready to consider that I might be involved in Marcus's scheme. Tonight you're risking everything to defend me. What happened in between?" Elaine was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "I called Margaret from the Azrup. I told her about the lawsuit, about my doubts, about how scared I was that everything good in my life might be built on lies." "What did she say?" "She asked me a simple question. In 30 days of recovery, has Sam ever asked you for anything beyond what you agreed to pay him?" And the answer was no. "You've turned down money, refused gifts, insisted on maintaining boundaries, even when it would have been easier to accept help." Elaine moved to the window again, looking out at the city lights that sparkled in the distance. Then she asked me another question. "Has Sam ever made you feel like you owe him something beyond basic human decency?" And again, the answer was no. "You've treated me like someone worth helping, not like someone who could be useful to you." Margaret sounds like a wise woman. She is. But the wisest thing she said was this: "Elaine, you're looking for reasons. Not to trust someone who's earned your trust because you're afraid of being hurt again. But fear-based decisions aren't recovery. They're just another form of hiding." Sam felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the anger and hurt he'd been carrying since that morning. "So you decided to choose trust over fear?" "I decided to choose love over fear," Elaine said quietly. "Because that's what this is, isn't it? Love. Complicated, inconvenient, scary as hell love between two people who have every reason to play it safe, but can't quite manage to do it." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and irrevocable. Sam had been avoiding that particular truth for weeks, but hearing Elaine speak it aloud made denial impossible. "Yes," he said simply. "It's love." They looked at each other across the study that had become the command center for their battle against Marcus Thornfield. Two middle-aged people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment to save each other's lives. "Tomorrow is going to be brutal," Elaine said. "Probably. We might lose everything: my company, your privacy, Sophia's chance at a normal teenage life. We might. Are you scared?" Sam considered the question seriously. Tomorrow would bring cameras and questions, skeptical reporters and hostile lawyers. His face would be on the evening news, his background scrutinized, his motives questioned by strangers who'd never bothered to learn his name. Sophia would become the cab driver's daughter, and Mrs. Chun would have reporters knocking on her door, but he would face it all standing, beside someone who'd chosen to fight for their future instead of hiding from their past. Someone who'd learned to value truth over comfort, connection over safety, love over fear. Terrified, he admitted, but not afraid enough to run. Good, Elaine said, moving closer until she was standing directly in front of him. Because I need you to know something before we walk into that press conference tomorrow. What's that? Whatever happens, whether we win or lose, whether the media believes us or destroys us, these 30 days have been the most important of my life. You saved me, Sam, not just from drinking myself to death, but from becoming someone I couldn't live with. You and Sophia reminded me who I wanted to be. Sam reached for her hands, noting how steady they were now compared to the trembling fingers he'd first shaken in the police station conference room. You saved us, too. Not with money or connections, but by showing Sophia that strong women fight for what they believe in. By showing me that it's possible to trust someone new without betraying the memory of someone you loved. They stood together in the quiet study, surrounded by evidence and strategy notes, and the detritus of a battle they might not win. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythms, unaware that 2 of its residents were preparing to risk everything for the chance to build something beautiful in true dot in 12 hours. They would face the cameras and tell their story to a world that might not believe them. But tonight, in the space between fear and hope, they had each other and the certainty that some things were worth fighting for. Regardless of the outcome, it would have to be enough. The Bowmont Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a media battleground by noon. Camera crews from every local news station occupied the back rows, while reporters from the San Antonio Express News, Austin American-Statesman, and Dallas Morning News claimed seats closer to the podium. Sam counted at least 30 people with press credentials, plus lawyers, board members, and various interested parties, whose presence suggested that word of the press conference had spread far beyond local media. Sam stood in his side room adjacent to the ballroom, watching the crowd through a crack in the door while trying to calm his racing heart. He'd changed clothes 3 times that morning before settling on his best suit, the same one he'd worn to Maria's funeral and Sophia's school award ceremonies. It was navy blue, slightly outdated, but clean and pressed with the kind of care that spoke of someone who understood the importance of presenting himself well. Beside him, Elaine paced in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Sam's monthly rent, but looked appropriately serious for the occasion. She'd chosen her outfit carefully expensive enough to command respect, conservative enough to avoid accusations of frivolity. Her hair was pulled back in a simple chignon, her makeup minimal but flawless. You don't have to do this, she said for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. I can present the evidence myself, field the questions about our relationship. You don't have to expose yourself and Sophia to this scrutiny. Yes, I do, Sam replied, adjusting his tie with hands that trembled slightly. If I let you face this alone, it proves Marcus's point that I'm someone who takes what he wants and disappears when things get difficult. Catherine appeared in the doorway, professional as always, but with worry evident in her expression. It's time. The attorney has finished reviewing the evidence packets, and the private investigator is here with the final report on the vehicle's sabotage. Sam took a deep breath, thinking about Sophia, who was at school trying to focus on trigonometry and European history while her father prepared to become a public figure. She'd hugged him extra tightly that morning, whispering, "Tell the truth. Papa, that's all you've ever done, and it's all you need to do now. Ready?" Elaine asked, extending her hand. "Ready," Sam said, taking it. They walked into the ballroom together, and Sam felt the weight of dozens of gazes as cameras flashed and reporters leaned forward in their seats. The podium stood at the front of the room like a witness stand, flanked by easels holding enlarged photographs and documents that would serve as evidence in the court of public opinion. Elaine approached the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd addressed shareholders and board meetings for 20 years. But when she began to speak, her voice carried a vulnerability that Sam had never heard in her business presentations. Thank you all for coming. My name is Elaine Beaumont, and I'm the CEO of Bowmont Hotels International. I've called this press conference to address a lawsuit that was filed against me yesterday, but more importantly, to tell you a story about what happens when corporate greed tries to destroy personal redemption. She gestured to Sam, who stepped forward despite his instinct to remain invisible. This is Sam Ortega. 31 days ago, he saved my life. Not in a dramatic way. There were no burning buildings or dramatic rescues. He simply saw someone in trouble and chose to help, even though helping cost him a night in jail and could have destroyed his reputation. Sam watched the reporters scribbling notes, their expressions ranging from skeptical to curious. He recognized the lead reporter from Channel 4, a woman named Jessica Martinez, who'd covered community stories in his neighborhood. Her presence gave him hope that at least one person in the room might be inclined to see him as a person rather than a character. In a larger drama, the lawsuit filed against me yesterday claims that Mr. Ortega and I conspired to stage the incident that brought us together. Elaine continued. It alleges that we manufactured a situation designed to defraud insurance companies and manipulate public sympathy. These allegations are not only false, they're part of a calculated campaign by Pinnacle Hospitality to damage my company's reputation and force a hostile takeover. She nodded to her attorney, who began distributing evidence packets to the assembled media. In your packets, you'll find a report from a licensed automotive specialist confirming that my limousine was deliberately sabotaged. You'll also find testimony from witnesses who observed photographers positioned across the street from Murphy's Jazz Club that night. Photographers whose equipment bore Pinnacle Hospitality corporate logos. Sam watched the reporters examining the evidence, their initial skepticism beginning to shift as they processed the technical details and witness statements. But he knew that facts alone wouldn't win this battle. People needed to understand not just what had happened, but why it mattered. I'd like Mr. Ortega to tell you about that night from his perspective, Elaine said, stepping back from the microphone. Sam approached the podium on legs that felt unsteady, looking out at an audience that held his future in their hands. In the back of the room, he spotted Sophia, who'd apparently skipped school to be there. She gave him a small wave and a thumbs up that steadied his nerves. I'm not used to speaking to groups like this, Sam began, his voice carrying the slight accent that marked him as a native San Antonian. I'm a cab driver. I've been driving cab for 8 years, ever since my back couldn't handle mechanic work anymore. Before that, I was married to a wonderful woman named Maria, and together we raised our daughter Sophia. He found his rhythm as he spoke, letting his natural storytelling ability take over. 31 days ago, I was driving home from a long shift, thinking about how my daughter was waiting for me to relieve our elderly neighbor who watches her when I work late. I saw a woman in trouble, clearly intoxicated, swaying near traffic, in danger of being hurt. I did what my wife taught me to do, what I've taught my daughter to do. I helped. Sam paused, looking directly into the cameras. I didn't know who Elaine Beaumont was. I didn't know about her company or her wealth or her influence. I saw someone who needed help, and I provided it. That's not conspiracy, that's community. That's what decent people do for each other. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Ortega, how do you respond to allegations that you've benefited financially from your relationship with Ms. Bowmont? Ms. Beaumont hired me to drive her to AA meetings and therapy appointments for 30 days, Sam replied honestly. She paid me $20,000 for that work, more money than I'd ever seen at one time. But she also gave me something more valuable. She showed my daughter that strong people ask for help when they need it, and that recovery is possible, even when you think you're too broken to fix. Another reporter stood up. What about accusations that this entire relationship was designed to generate sympathy for Ms. Beaumont's company? Sam felt a flash of anger, but kept his voice steady. If Ms. Beaumont wanted to generate sympathy, she would have hired a professional. She would have found someone with credentials and training and a background that looked good in press releases. Instead, she hired a cab driver with a high school education who clips coupons and shops at thrift stores. Does that sound like a public relations strategy to you? The room was quiet, except for the clicking of cameras and the scratching of pens on notepads. Sam realized he had their attention, not just their professional interest, but their human curiosity about a story that was more complex than the simple narratives they usually covered. I want to say something to Marcus Thornfield, Sam continued, his voice growing stronger. You tried to use my financial struggles against me. You tried to turn my kindness into evidence of greed. But you made one crucial mistake. You underestimated what people will do to protect the ones they love. He gestured to Elaine, who stepped back up to the microphone. The transition was smooth, practiced, the movement of two people who'd learned to work as a team. Mr. Thornfield's lawsuit isn't really about me, Elaine said, her voice carrying a new edge of determination. It's about a corporate culture that sees human decency as weakness, that views genuine connection as a liability to be exploited. He's counting on cynicism, on people believing that kindness must have an ulterior motive, that love between people from different backgrounds must be manufactured. She pulled out a final document from her folder. This morning, we received confirmation that Mr. Thornfield's brother-in-law was paid $5,000 to sabotage my vehicle. We have bank records, witness testimony, and a signed confession. This isn't a civil dispute, it's criminal conspiracy. The bombshell of the mechanic's confession sent a ripple of excitement through the assembled reporters. Cameras flashed as Elaine held up the signed document, and Sam could see the story shifting in real time from corporate, he said, she said, to criminal conspiracy with clear victims and villains. Jessica Martinez from Channel 4 stood up, her hand raised. Ms. Beaumont, do you plan to file criminal charges against Mr. Thornfield? That decision will be made by the district attorney's office, Elaine replied. But we've turned over all evidence to law enforcement and will cooperate fully with any investigation. Mr. Ortega, called a reporter from the Express News, how has this experience affected your family? Sam thought about Sophia sitting in the back of the room, about the anxiety attacks that had sent her to the hospital, about Mrs. Chun fielding phone calls from reporters who'd already tracked down their address. My daughter has learned that standing up for what's right sometimes comes with a cost, he said. But she's also learned that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible to win. What's your relationship with Miss Beaumont now? Asked another reporter. Is this arrangement continuing beyond the original 30 days? Sam looked at Elaine, seeing the question in her eyes, the same question they'd been dancing around for weeks. In front of 30 reporters and dozens of cameras, with their words about to be broadcast across South Texas, they had to decide what they were to each other. Ms. Beaumont and I, Sam began, and stopped, realizing that corporate language wouldn't serve the truth. Elaine and I care about each other. We've been through something together that's changed both of our lives. Whatever happens with lawsuits and investigations, we're going to figure out how to move forward together. Are you saying you're romantically involved? The question came from a young reporter in the back, spoken with the kind of directness that made both Sam and Elaine pause. I'm saying we're two people who found each other when we both needed finding, Sam replied. Labels can wait. Right now, we're focused on making sure the truth comes out and that people like Marcus Thornfield can't destroy lives just to make a profit. Elaine stepped closer to the microphone. I want to address something that hasn't been said directly, but is implicit in many of your questions. Yes, Sam and I come from different backgrounds. Yes, there are disparities in our education, our wealth, our social circles. But those differences have made our relationship stronger, not weaker. She looked directly into the Channel 4 camera. Sam taught me things they don't teach in business school. How to shop for groceries. How to cook a meal for people you love. How to sit in an A meeting and listen to other people's stories without trying to fix or manage them. I've tried to share what I know about navigating institutions, about using resources to help people, about the responsibility that comes with privilege. What about your company's board of directors? Asked the Dallas Morning News reporter. How do they feel about their CEO's personal relationships becoming public? Our board has been briefed on the situation, Elaine said crisply. They understand that this attack on my character is really an attack on our company's independence. They also understand that my recovery from alcoholism, supported by people who care about my well-being rather than my stock price, has made me a better leader. Sam watched the reporters processing this information, noting how the story continued to evolve as more details emerged. What had started as a simple lawsuit was becoming a complex narrative about corporate corruption, personal redemption, and the unexpected ways people could find love and healing. A reporter near the front raised his hand. Mr. Thornfield's representatives have suggested that this press conference is itself evidence of a coordinated campaign to manipulate public opinion. How do you respond to that? I respond by inviting anyone who doubts our story to examine our evidence, Sam said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. Talk to a group where Elaine has been attending meetings. Talk to my neighbors who've known me for 17 years. Talk to my daughter's teachers, to the customers I've driven, to anyone who's interacted with us during the past month. The truth has a weight to it, Elaine added. Lies require elaborate construction, careful coordination, constant maintenance. Truth just requires courage to speak it and evidence to support it. As if summoned by her words, the ballroom doors opened and a familiar figure entered, Margaret from the A group, followed by several other members Sam recognized from Thursday night meetings. They took seats in the back, their presence a quiet testament to the community Elaine had been building in recovery. Those are members of my A group, Elaine said, noticing the reporter's curious glances. They're here because recovery isn't something you do alone, and they wanted to show support for someone they've watched grow stronger every week for the past month. Jessica Martinez stood again. Ms. Bowmont, what do you want people to take away from this story? Elaine was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. I want people to understand that redemption is possible, but it requires help from others. I want them to know that kindness isn't weakness, that caring about people different from yourself isn't naive, and that real love, can happen at any stage of life if you're brave enough to risk it. She looked at Sam, then back at the assembled media. Mostly, I want people to remember that in a world where power is often used to exploit and manipulate, there are still people who use whatever power they have to lift others up. Sam Ortega is one of those people, and I'm grateful every day that he chose to help a stranger instead of driving past. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, covering details about the investigation, the timeline of their relationship, and their plans for the future. But Sam sensed that the crucial battle had already been won. The reporters were asking follow-up questions now, seeking clarification rather than challenging their basic credibility. When the formal press conference ended, several reporters approached them individually for additional comments. Margaret and the other members formed a protective circle around Elaine, fielding questions about her recovery with the practiced support of people who understood that healing required community. Sophia appeared at Sam's elbow, her face glowing with pride. "Papa, you were amazing," she whispered. "You sounded like someone important." "I am someone important," Sam said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm your father, and I'm Elaine's." He paused, still struggling with labels that felt both too small and too large for what they'd built together. "Friend," Sophia supplied helpfully. "And maybe something more when you both figure out what to call it." As the ballroom emptied and the camera crews packed their equipment, Sam found himself standing beside Elaine near the podium where they just told their story to the world. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the ballroom's windows cast everything in a golden glow that made the moment feel both surreal and perfectly natural. "How do you think we did?" Elaine asked. "I think we told the truth as clearly as we could," Sam said. "Now we wait to see if people believe it." "Whatever happens next," Elaine said quietly, "I'm glad we fought. I'm glad we didn't let fear make our decisions." Sam thought about the past 48 hours, the hurt and doubt of yesterday morning, the evidence gathering and strategy sessions, the leap of faith it had taken to stand before cameras and claim their relationship publicly. It had been the most intense period of his life since Maria's illness, but also the most purposeful. "So am I," he said, and meant it completely. Outside the ballroom windows, San Antonio continued its daily rhythms. People went to work, children attended school, families gathered for dinner. The world hadn't changed because two unlikely people had fallen in love and decided to fight for their future together. But for Sam and Elaine, everything had changed. They'd crossed a line from private connection to public commitment, from careful friendship to acknowledged love. Whatever the media coverage brought, whatever legal battles lay ahead, they declared themselves to each other and to the world. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and exactly what love was supposed to feel like when you found it later in life, when you understood its value because you'd learned to live without it. 6 months later, Sam stood in the kitchen of his new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom unit in a complex with actual amenities like a pool and a gym, watching Elaine teach Sophia how to make tres leches cake for Mrs. Chun's 84th birthday party. The afternoon sun streamed through windows that actually opened, illuminating a scene that still felt like a dream some mornings when he woke up. "No, Mia, you have to fold the eggs in gently," Elaine was saying, guiding Sophia's hand as she mixed the batter. "If you stir too hard, the cake will be tough, like this?" Sophia asked, concentrating with the same intensity she brought to calculus homework. "Perfect. Your mother would be proud of how well you're learning to cook." Sam smiled at the easy way. Elaine invoked Maria's memory, never trying to replace her, but always honoring her presence in their lives. It had taken months for him to believe that loving someone new didn't diminish what he'd shared with his wife. But Elaine's gentle understanding had helped him realize that the heart had infinite capacity for growth. The aftermath of the press conference had been swift and decisive. A mechanic's testimony, combined with banking records showing payments from Marcus Thornfield's shell companies, had prompted a criminal investigation that led to charges of conspiracy, sabotage, and corporate espionage. Marcus was facing potential prison time, and Pinnacle Hospitality's board had forced him to resign in disgrace. More importantly, for Sam's peace of mind, the media coverage had been overwhelmingly positive. The story of a billionaire and a cab driver finding love while fighting corporate corruption had captured public imagination in ways neither of them had expected. Sophia had been approached by local college recruiters, impressed by her composure during interviews, and Sam had received job offers from several transportation companies who wanted to hire someone with his newfound public profile. But the most significant change hadn't been professional or financial. It had been personal. Sam had learned to accept help without seeing it as charity, while Elaine had learned to offer support without trying to control outcomes. They'd built something new together, a relationship that honored both of their histories while creating space for shared dreams. The cake needs to cool for an hour before we can add the milk mixture, Elaine announced, setting the pan on a wire rack. Perfect timing for us to walk to Mrs. Chun's and help set up for the party. The walk to Sam's old apartment building was short but meaningful. He'd chosen to move only 6 blocks away, partly because Sophia wanted to stay in the same school district, but mostly because this neighborhood had become home in ways that went beyond mere residence. Mrs. Chun still lived in 2C, still brought dumplings when someone was sick, still served as the unofficial grandmother to every child in the complex. Sam, Elaine, Sophia. Mrs. Chun's voice carried across the courtyard as they approached with boxes of decorations and the carefully transported cake. At 84, she moved more slowly than she used to, but her smile was as bright as ever. You didn't have to do all this for an old woman's birthday. Of course we did, Sophia said, setting down her box to hug Mrs. Chun carefully. Your family. The party was a neighborhood affair current and former residents, gathering in the courtyard that had been decorated with colorful streamers and balloons. Sam watched Elaine move through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd learned that being genuine was more important than being impressive. She'd mastered the art of small talk with people whose concerns were rent payments and overtime shifts rather than stock prices and board meetings. She fits, Mrs. Chun observed, settling beside Sam on a bench while Sophia and Elaine organized games for the younger children. I wasn't sure she would, but she fits. It took some adjustment, Sam admitted, for both of us. Good things usually do. Your Maria, she didn't fit at first either, remember? Too educated for this neighborhood, too ambitious for a mechanic's wife. But she learned to see past the surface, just like this one. Sam watched as Elaine helped a 5-year-old with a pinata. Stick, her expensive clothes forgotten, in favor of making sure every child got a turn. 6 months ago, she would have hired event planners and caterers for a birthday party. Today, she was personally ensuring that the potato salad stayed cold and the music wasn't too loud for the older residents. How's the business going? Mrs. Chun asked, referring to the community outreach program Sam had started with Elaine's. Backing. Better than we expected. We've helped 12 families navigate housing applications, connected 8 people with job training programs, and we've got funding approved for a financial literacy workshop series. The program had been Elaine's ideal way to use her resources and Sam's community connections to address systemic problems at the individual level. Sam provided transportation and translation services, while Elaine handled legal advocacy and institutional navigation. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was making a real difference in people's lives. And the wedding planning? Mrs. Chun asked, with the directness of someone who'd earned the right to ask personal questions. Sam felt his face warm. We're taking things slowly. Sophia's starting college in the fall, and we want to make sure she's settled before we make any big changes. Smart. Mrs. Chun nodded approvingly. But don't wait too long. At our age, we don't have forever. As evening approached and the party wound down, Sam found himself helping clean up while Sophia and Elaine distributed leftover cake to neighbors. It was the kind of ordinary moment that had become precious to him, working alongside people he cared about, solving small problems together, building the kind of community that sustained people through both celebrations and crises. Ready to head home? Elaine asked as they finished stacking chairs. Ready, Sam said, though the question of which home she meant had become delightfully complicated. They'd been staying at each other's places with increasing frequency, and Sophia had started referring to Elaine's house as the other place we live. As they walked back through the neighborhood, Sam reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 31 days ago, he'd been a struggling single father, with no prospects beyond surviving each day as it came. Tonight, he was walking home with a woman he loved and a daughter who was thriving. Having just celebrated with a community that had embraced them all, the transformation hadn't been without challenges. There had been awkward moments at business, functions where Sam felt out of place, and family gatherings where Elaine's wealth made others uncomfortable. They'd had to navigate questions about money and power, about raising Sophia in a world of privilege while maintaining her values, about balancing public attention with private happiness. But they'd faced each challenge together with the same honesty and commitment that had gotten them through the crisis with Marcus Thornfield. They'd learned to be patient with each other's insecurities, to communicate clearly about expectations and boundaries, and to remember that love was an action as much as a feeling. "Papa," Sophia said as they reached their apartment, "can I ask you something?" "Always. Are you happy?" "Really happy? Not just managing to get by happy?" Sam considered the question seriously. Happiness felt like too small a word for what he'd discovered over the past 6 months. He'd found purpose beyond survival, connection beyond obligation, hope beyond mere endurance. "Yes, Mia, I'm really happy." "Are you?" "I'm happy because you're happy," Sophia said simply. "And because Elaine makes you laugh the way Mama used to. Different laughs, but the same joy, you know." Later that evening, after Sophia had gone to bed, and Sam and Elaine sat on the small balcony overlooking the courtyard where the party had been held, Sam pulled out something he'd been carrying in his pocket for weeks. "I've been thinking about what Mrs. Chun said," he began, suddenly nervous despite months of growing certainty about his feelings. "About not waiting too long?" Elaine asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "About that, and about building something together that honors what we've both lost while creating space for what we might find." Sam reached for her hand, noting how perfectly it fit in his. "I know we said we'd wait until Sophia was settled in college, but I also know that life doesn't always give us as much time as we think we have." He pulled out a simple gold band, not the elaborate diamond ring he might have chosen if money had been no object, but a ring that spoke of commitment and partnership rather than display. "Elaine Beaumont," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "will you marry me? Will you build a life with Sophia and me that's Messier and more wonderful than anything either of us planned?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, tears visible in the light from the courtyard below. "Yes, to all of it, to the mess and the wonder and the family we've somehow managed to create." As Sam slipped the ring onto her finger, he thought about the cab ride that had started this journey, how he'd been rushing home to relieve Mrs. Chun, worried about being late, focused on the small responsibilities that filled his days. He could never have imagined that stopping to help a stranger would lead to this moment, to this choice, to this future that felt both unexpected and inevitable. "So what happens now?" Elaine asked, admiring the ring that caught the light as she moved her hand. "Now we plan a wedding, help Sophia choose a college, figure out how to merge our lives without losing what makes each of us who we are," Sam said. "Now we get to find out what happily ever after looks like when it starts in the middle of life instead of at the beginning." "I like that," Elaine said, settling against his shoulder. "I like the idea that our best chapters might still be ahead of us." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the courtyard where neighbors were finishing their evening routines, children being called inside, porch lights flickering on, the gentle rhythms of a community settling into night. In the distance, the city hummed with its usual energy, but here in this small space they'd claimed as theirs, everything felt peaceful and possible. "There's something else," Sam said, reaching into his other pocket. "Something I wanted to show you before we make this official." He pulled out a faded photograph, one he'd been carrying in his wallet for 3 years, but had never shown to anyone. It was a picture of Maria, taken just months before her diagnosis, showing her laughing at something outside the camera's view. Her hair was windblown, her expression joyful and unguarded, and she looked exactly like the woman Sam had fallen in love with 20 years earlier. "I wanted you to see her happy," Sam said quietly. "I wanted you to know that loving you doesn't mean forgetting her, but it does mean choosing to believe that the heart can expand rather than just replace." Elaine studied the photograph with the careful attention of someone who understood its significance. "She's beautiful, and she looks like someone who would want the people she loved to find happiness again. She told me once that love wasn't a finite resource, that caring for our neighbors didn't mean we had less care for each other, that helping strangers didn't diminish what we shared as a family. I think she'd understand what we've found together." "I hope so," Elaine said, handing the photograph back, "because I'd like her to approve of the woman who's going to help raise her daughter." As they prepared to go inside, Sam took one last look at the courtyard where Mrs. Chun's birthday party had unfolded just hours earlier. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Sophia's college applications, wedding planning, the ongoing work of building their community outreach program. There would be moments of doubt and difficulty, times when their different backgrounds created friction, occasions when the weight of public attention felt overwhelming. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd built together and the community that had embraced them, Sam felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the broken limousine that had stranded Elaine outside a jazz club, for the courage that had made him stop to help a stranger, for Sophia's wisdom and Mrs. Chun's dumplings and Margaret's guidance at AA meetings. Most of all, he felt grateful for the lesson he'd learned over the past 6 months, that redemption was possible at any age, that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the best thing you could do was trust someone else to help carry your burdens. As they turned off the lights and headed toward whatever dreams awaited them, Sam realized that he'd finally learned to sleep peacefully again. Not because his problems had disappeared or his future was guaranteed, but because he was no longer facing life alone. He had Elaine, who'd taught him that accepting help was a form of strength rather than weakness. He had Sophia, who'd shown him that families could grow and change without losing their essential core. He had Mrs. Chun and Margaret and a whole network of people who'd proven that community was something you built one relationship at a time. And somewhere in the space between sleeping and waking, between memory and hope, Sam could almost hear Maria's voice telling him what she'd told him so many times during their marriage, that love was always worth the risk, that kindness was never wasted, and that the best stories were the ones where people found each other when they needed it most. In the morning, he would wake up beside someone who'd chosen to build a future with him, despite every rational reason to play it safe. Sophia would come out of her room with college brochures and wedding magazines, already planning their next chapter with the enthusiasm of someone who'd learned that families could expand without breaking. But for now, in the quiet darkness of a home filled with love and possibility, Sam Ortega finally allowed himself to believe that sometimes fairy tales did come true, not because life was perfect, but because imperfect people were willing to love each other perfectly. One day at a time, the yellow cab that had started their journey sat parked outside, no longer a symbol of financial struggle, but a reminder of the work that had brought meaning to his life. Tomorrow, he might drive it to pick up clients for the community outreach program, or to take Elaine to another AA meeting, or simply to remind himself that he was still the same man who'd stopped to help a stranger on a rainy night 6 months ago. The man who'd learned that sometimes the most important destinations were the ones you never planned to reach, and that the best traveling companions were the ones who helped you discover that you were stronger and kinder and more capable of love than you'd ever imagined possible.